Legislature's back in order. We have a quorum. Senator St. Augustine, you're recognized on Bill 161.
Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move to accept Bill number 161-34 COR as amended by the Committee on Environment, Land, Agriculture, and Procurement Reform, unsubstituted on the floor. An act to rescind administrative jurisdiction of lot number 5173 new -2-R2, known as the Tumuning Multipurpose Field, granted the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, and to vest the office of the Tumon Harmon Mayor with administrative jurisdiction of the same.
Does everybody have a copy of the bill as substituted? Is there an objection to the bill as substituted? Hearing none. You may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I move to place Bill number 161-34 COR as substituted on the third reading file, and I'd like to discuss it.
Please, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, colleagues, on October 27, 2017, the bill was sent back to the committee pending the Chamorro Land Trust Commission resolution. On March 23, 2018, a supplemental committee report was filed, and that attached was the Chamorro Land Trust Commission resolution number 2018-01, declaration of support for administrative land transfer to the mayor of municipality of Tumuning and the Department of Education. And that's available on the website. Unless any of my colleagues want a copy, we'll have a copy made. And that was the only thing that was pending this bill. We have a quick recess so we can get copies, Mr. Speaker, for...
We'll take a short recess. During the recess, we had a couple of bills that, while that's being copied and circulated, can we go back to some of the bills that were sitting so that we can clear them and send them down? Senator Addy, do you have one that...
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, yesterday we had set aside Bill 34-34 COR. This is relative to an act to amend Section 5127 of Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to limiting the period of validity of determination of need and the requirement for legislative approval required for exceptional term contracts. And when we had set this aside yesterday, it was because we were waiting for language to amend on page 3, lines 2 through 5, which would have deleted the language that would have provided for automatic approval due to an action by the legislature.
I'm sorry, Senator. We can't move on that. When we broke on your bill, on this bill, Senator Espaldon had the floor until he comes back in.
Okay. Well, if that won't work, I got another one that might work.
All right.
Can you try 60
So, Mr. Chairman,
excuse me, everybody. Has 161 substituted been circulated so all the senators can look at it so that we can discuss it? Because and they're copying the resolution so that we don't have to stop. So I'm taking bills that have been sitting on the side. Senator Adam, 222?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. When we set that aside, we had set it aside because the Vice Speaker wanted to put in an amendment on page 2 somewhere there around line 11, basically, I guess around line 11 to put requirements on the prospective buyer of this remnant of public land. And so maybe it'd be appropriate at this point then for the Vice Speaker to proffer her amendment. And I believe that she did before it was put in writing, and I had objected to it and then requested that we set it aside so that we can get a better understanding of this land registration process.
Are you ready to address this, Vice Speaker?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I don't know if the clerk can verify, when we left off, I had already made the motion, and so it's pending. There was a request for a recess so that they could review more what is the registration process. But for those who might not have been here at that time, I'll repeat the amendment. If
Please.
Clerk, that's where we left off, correct? No? Bill 2.
Okay, no,
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Senator Espaldon was amending it. Oh, I give up. Senator Espaldon had the floor on that one also. So, Senator San Augustine, let's go back to 161 and just take care of it.
Mr. Speaker, the issues on Bill 161, my colleagues should have had a copy. All the amendments that were approved is addressed on the bill, the substitute bill. The only thing that was missing was the resolution. Now everybody should have a copy. Unless there's any objection, I'd like to just move this to the voting file.
Has everybody had an opportunity to review the resolution by the Chamorro Land Trust Commission? Why don't you read it into the record, Senator San Augustine?
You want me to read the resolution? Okay. Whereas the Chamorro Land Trust Resolution number 2018-01, declaration of support for administrative land transfer to the Mayor of Municipality of Tamuning and the Department of Education. Whereas the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, hereafter CLTC, Board of Commissioners rescinds CLTC Resolution number 2017-17 and issues this resolution to correct and identify land parcels. Whereas the CLTC, in accordance with Title 21, Section 75-105, declares its support to transfer properties to the Mayor of Municipality of Tamuning and the Department of Education. Whereas the CLTC Board of Commissioners recognize the Tamuning Mayor's need for public land for sport and recreation fields for its residents in the area of municipality already devoted and maintained as public use parks. Whereas the Tamuning Mayor desires lot 5173-new-2-R2, Municipality of Tamuning, defined by survey map LM check number 014FY92, Exhibit A, with an area of approximately 24,686 plus square meters or 6.10 acres, and a 707 square meter portion of lot 5173-new-3, Municipality of Tamuning, as shown on survey map LM check number 165 FY80, Exhibit B, and scheme number M19-S002, Exhibit C, wherein the blue Tamuning mark is currently located to be under the control of the mayor of the municipality of Tamuning to create and improve recreation parks and fields, and has diligently sought private partnership to assist and facilitate the creation and equipping these recreation fields. Whereas the Tamuning mayor may also directly seek community-related funding to create recreation park and field facilities on the designated property, and more appropriately manage the recreation park and field area for village residents and surrounding residents. Whereas a 4,878 square meter portion of lot 5173-new-3, municipality of Tamuning, as shown on survey map LM check number 165 FY80, Exhibit B, and scheme number M19-S002, Exhibit C, used by Lyndon B. Johnson Elementary School, was mistakenly transferred to Chamorro Land Trust inventory in the Governor's administrative transfer of government land to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission on February 18, 1994, pursuant to 21 GCA, Section 75104. This lot has been exclusively used by the Department of Education, and the elementary school rests on the entire property and should be fully administered by the Department of Education. Whereas on September 21st, 2017, the CLTC Board of Commissioners at their regular scheduled meeting, Tamuning, Guam, reviewed and approved by motion to support legislation to administratively transfer from Chamorro Land Trust land inventory. 1. A 4,878 square meter portion of lot 5173-new-3, municipality of Tamuning, as shown on survey map LM check number 165 FY80 and scheme number M19-S002, used by Lyndon B. Johnson Elementary School to the Department of Education. 2. A 707 square meter portion of lot 5173-new-3, municipality of Tamuning, as shown on survey map LM check number 165 FY80 and scheme number M19-S002 from Chamorro Land Trust Commission to the mayor of the municipality of Tamuning. And number 3, lot 5173-new-2-R2, municipality of Tamuning, as shown on survey map LM check number 014 FY92, with an area of approximately 24,686 plus square meters or 7.10 acres to the mayor of the municipality of Tamuning. Now therefore be it resolved, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission Board of Commissioners approves the listed land for the administrative transfer to the Tamuning mayor and the Department of Education. The Chamorro Land Trust Commission requests a reversionary clause be included in the legislation requiring the property being transferred to the Tamuning mayor revert back to CLTC land inventory if it is not used as a recreation facility. The Chamorro Land Trust Commission Board of Commissioners transmit this resolution to the Legislature in Guam, duly and regularly adopted by the Chamorro Land Trust Commission this first day of March 2018. Signed, G. Pika Farron, Chairwoman, Chamorro Land Trust Commission. Michael J.B. Bora, Administrative Director, Chamorro Land Trust Commission, dated March 1st, 2018. And
with that resolution and your substituted version, did your substituted version include the reversionary clause as requested by the?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Speaker, it does say that on page 2, section 3.
On the main motion, any senator wish to be heard? Senators, the Vice Speaker, then Senator Nelson, then Senator Nicholas.
If I could just ask a question and perhaps speak on the bill later, but my notes say that when we sent this bill back to committee, it was because the resolution from Chamorro Land Trust, the lot numbers that they're describing here do not match what we have in the bill. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's still the case. Because the bill intends to transfer 5173-new-2-R2. But I don't know if I may just pose that to the sponsor. I don't see that in this resolution unless I'm just reading it wrong. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, on the first page of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, number 4, whereas the community desires 5173-new-2-R2. The bill refers to 5173-new-2-R2. It's on your first page, number 4, whereas. I'll bring it to you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, I have a different resolution, so I'm still waiting for a copy of that resolution, I guess.
She had the other resolution that was rescinded by the Chamorro Land Trust. Did you? They'll be handing out a
I
copy.
thought we had copies circulated. The resolution you should be looking at is dated March the 1st, 2018. Stop reading 2017s, please. Does everybody have one 2018? Senator Nicholas, did you wish to speak on the bill?
Sure, Mr. Speaker. I first wanted to start by posing a question to the author. Based on this resolution, this is land trust property that's being put under the administrative jurisdiction of the mayor for the use of the community. I'm just curious, why is this piece of property not being leased to the municipality? Why is it being just without any expense given to the municipality for its use?
So your question is, why aren't they leased? Why don't they just lease it to the mayor? Well, the mayor's office approached me and asked me if we can request that it be transferred, and then we communicated with Chamorro Land Trust, and they were in support of that. The Tamuini Mayors has been in control of that field for decades. All they're asking for now is officially administrative control of the property.
Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the answer. I raised the question to raise a point that I've raised with regards to the Chamorro Land Trust many times when these kind of matters come before this body. We need to stop using the Chamorro Land Trust as a land bank for the government. When lands go into the land trust, they should be for the express objectives of the trust. And so if the government needs to access the lands in the land trust, the government should lease the lands from the land trust and then pay those leases to the trust. The trust can use those leases to further survey properties and get them out to the individuals waiting for their land. You know, I wanted to give an example, Mr. Speaker. Imagine, you know, we have an unfunded liability in the retirement fund. that we're paying with appropriations. Imagine if we had a practice where every single available dollar we found, we immediately put it into the retirement fund to pay that fund down. And then all of a sudden, whenever we needed money, we just started taking money out of the retirement fund to meet an obligation that we all of a sudden decided to fund. We would all of a sudden have money going in and money coming out and have no idea what the true solvency is of that fund, and we would lose focus as to the purpose of that fund. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that's what's happening with the Chamorro Land Trust. Every time we have what we perceive to be an extra acre in this government, we put it into the Chamorro Land Trust, and we do so saying, it's for the Chamorro Land Trust, and we're doing it to build up the trust inventory. But then whenever we have inventory in that trust, it's being used for purposes other than the intended purposes of the land trust. Such as for bills like this, where we're going to now allow the mayor to have control over that property for sports facilities. And yeah, it's a good cause. And yeah, it's adjacent to similar facilities that the mayor has been managing. But the reality is that if we were to truly manage this as a trust for the Chamorro people, we would look at leasing this property to the mayor and monetizing it. So I just wanted to raise this point, Mr. Speaker, that if we're going to be handling land this way, it's going to just continue to create an uncertainty with which the land trust is operating, because now, even they're passing resolutions saying, yeah, the mayor can go ahead and use it for this purpose. And granted, the land trust has the power to pass those kind of resolutions, but how is providing land for sports facilities consistent with the purposes by which the land trust was established? It's not. So if the land trust was to lease that land to the mayor to monetize that resource, to continue to pursue its mission as a land trust for the Chamorro people, then that would probably be something that can make a little bit more sense. But I would really like to just put on the record, if it's a land trust for the Chamorro people, it should be managed as a land trust for the Chamorro people, not as a land bank for the government of Guam. To put in extra acres and to say, okay, I put in acres when they're available, I'm going to take out acres when I need them. That's just a totally different function. And if we need to create a land bank in this government to facilitate the extra land inventories and to determine how they're going to be utilized and sent out, and then to give, if a parcel goes into the land bank and after 10 years isn't utilized, then it goes into the trust, perhaps that's a mechanism that needs to be created. But right now, this process of using the Chamorro Land Trust as a land bank as opposed to an actual land trust for the Chamorro people is, I think it's undermining the intended purpose of the land trust. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the main motion, anybody else wish to be heard? On the main, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do share the same concerns as the retiring speaker. Here we have the Chamorro Land Trust Commission writing resolution basically saying that they agree that the Tamuning mayor should have administrative jurisdiction over this piece of property. And it's been said already that they've been utilizing this field, so I'm trying to understand the reasoning behind why we need to give administrative jurisdiction to the Tamuning mayor when they've already been utilizing the property as such. And also, if I would like to perhaps look at Section 3 in the revisionary clause and perhaps give a timeline that if it is not used, because there's no timeline, if that is not used to provide facilities and services for community recreational activities and sports organizations without good cause, it says that the lot shall revert to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, but there's no set timeline. So perhaps the sponsor could recommend a timeline. If not, then perhaps is 10 years okay?
Senator St. Augustine, would you address the question raised? Would you please repeat?
If the sponsor so yield, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question is in Section 3, the revisionary clause, there's no timeline set for if the facilities is not utilized at a certain time, or if the lot is not utilized for facilities and services for community recreational activities and sports organizations. And so I was wondering if the sponsor would be amenable to inserting a timeline into the revisionary clause. If not, then perhaps we can come to a feasible timeline so that this land was properly utilized.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator San Agustin, do you yield?
Yes, Madam Speaker, if we want to put a timeline, I have no problem with that. It's just ironic that all the mayor was asking for is that for decades they've been taking care of the field. Now they're asking, can they in fact get administrative control? And that's been granted by Chamorro Land Trust. But putting a time period, it wouldn't matter, because as soon as if this bill is passed, they're going to continue fixing it up. But at least now they have full control over the property.
Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So if I could just reserve the rest of my time and work with legal to insert a timeline as this amendment in Section 3, the revisionary clause.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Speaker Cruz, you're recognized.
With all due respect to the sponsor and probably myself as Speaker and the Oversight Chair for Lands, I think the problem is that the legislature really has no business in trying to do administratively transferring land in the Chamorro Land Trust. When the late Senator Eddie Regis passed legislation for everything to be set aside, it gave it to the Land Trust, and the Land Trust Commission should be handling that whole thing. There is no need for them to send us a resolution that they support a piece of legislation. They can and should be able to lease it, to transfer it, whatever they're going to do, as long as it's within their jurisdiction. It really isn't for us to now put a timeline, administratively transfer it. We probably shouldn't have had introduced a piece of legislation and entertaining here to administratively transfer. All we're doing is circumventing the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, which should have been the one that's operating this. When I ruled on the Chamorro Land Trust Commission 23 years ago, it was supposed to be the most powerful commission in government, answerable to no one, which is the reason why 40 years ago the governor didn't implement the Chamorro Land Trust, because we didn't want to lose control of it. But the truth be known, the Chamorro Land Trust is in charge of all the land under it, and neither we, unless the courts come in and change the commission, change the constitutionality of the commission, it's the most powerful commission that's ever been created. And we should not be interfering with them and passing legislation to do anything, because if they don't want to do it, we shouldn't force them to do it.
Thank you, Speaker Cruz. Senator Atta, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to, I guess as a point of information, when this bill was initially introduced, we went ahead and had a public hearing. The Chamorro Land Trust Commission did come in and supported the bill, but the committee did not move on it until it received a formal resolution from the Chamorro Land Trust saying that, yes, they support transferring administrative jurisdiction of this property. So it should be, I just want to make it perfectly clear that whenever a bill gets referred to the committee, pertaining to Chamorro Land Trust property to transfer administrative jurisdiction or whatever, the committee fully respects the authority of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission on these properties and will not act on it until it has received a formal resolution from the Chamorro Land Trust saying, yes, we concur with the request. So in the case of this property, it was not pulled out from the commission. It was basically facilitating I guess the desire of the Chamorro Land Trust to transfer this property over to the under the jurisdiction of the Tamuning mayor. The other part to it that kind of delayed the reporting out of this bill was that the initial map that was provided was an older map. And so we had to wait until the new map was provided, which basically shows what part of the Chamorro Land Trust property had actually been leased out to GTA. If you pass by that Tamuning school there, you'll see the blue stores, they call it, that and the GTA facility. And so we had to wait for the new map that actually showed correctly how that was carved out, so that all you had left was the existing basketball court and the baseball field itself. Now, there was a question about the reversionary clause there on the reversionary clause on Section 3. And all that is saying is that if for some reason the mayor's office decides to use that now to stack up junk cars or other things and use it for something else other than a baseball field or a sports field, then that will be basically grounds to say, okay, deal is off, that property goes back to the jurisdiction of Chamorro Land Trust. But make it be very clear that this property was not pulled out from under the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, and that's why the committee was very, very careful to make sure that there was a formal resolution of concurrence. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ada. On the main motion, would any member like to be heard on the main motion? Vice Speaker Chalaki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I share the concerns regarding the legislature's continued pulling of land out of the trust, and I absolutely commend the mayor of Tamuning and the mayors of all the villages who want to use these lands for public purposes. But I guess my question is more to the Land Trust Commission, because the Land Trust Commission is tasked with a fiduciary responsibility, a duty to protect these lands. And I think, well, I know that the Chamorro Land Trust law itself allows for the commission to allow the use of land for public uses that are required in the residential communities that the land trust envisioned. So it envisioned the use of a license to allow for whatever that community that would be established by the Chamorro Land Trust. It allowed for schools to be put on these properties. It allowed for a license for theaters. It listed things like even gas stations, I think. But I thought it was very visionary at the time, of course, but it really did plan for a community, and it continues to allow the use of the land as a Chamorro Land Trust Commission sees fit for public purposes for that community. And I think this is a perfect example of a use that could be licensed by the Chamorro Land Trust. I've asked them several times, yes, why not use a license to allow this use by a mayor, particularly for recreational facilities. I mean, those I think are a perfect combination of, you know, the intent of the land trust and the efforts of the mayors. I also question, it's never really been made very clear. Why does a mayor need, all the mayors, I mean, it's not just one mayor, but many of them are asking for land and to be transferred to them. And so that legal transfer is what I'm still trying to figure out. I think why do they need title in their name? What is it that they are doing that they need title and they can't continue? Especially this case, it's pretty fair to say that the mayor has had exclusive use of this area. I don't think that Chamorro Land Trust has come in and prevented the mayor of the people of Tamuning or all the sports community from doing anything in that vicinity. I think actually that the mayor, the Land Trust respects that the mayor actually administers these fields. And I think that's consistent with the Land Trust, and I think it's consistent with, how we want our communities to be built. So I read through the committee report and I read through all the testimony, but I still, even in this bill, and like I said, it's in a lot of these bills that transfer land out of the trust to some other entity to control. Why do they need legal title? What is it that they need legal title? Is it because somebody's threatening to take it away from them if they build a bathroom on it? Or is it because, are they going to, normally I need title because I'm going to go mortgage the property or something, that's when I really need title. Otherwise, you can allow me to use your property and I can use it for as long as you allow it. And so that's what I really kind of feel like it's not very clear. And so that's my concern. I have those two concerns. One is that this process should be allowed without the need to legally transfer the land, and that what really are the implications. I don't think we've really ever found out what the true legal implications are in this type of a transfer. We've got so many restrictions on the transfer of government land from any government agencies and from the trust. So I'm just wondering, do the mayors operate under that same restriction or not? I will check legal on that, but I'm just concerned about that we should be very cautious of those type of things. But of course, I support the use by the mayor of this property. And it does, and I will say for the record shows from the testimony of land management that this land was by public law placed in the, given to the Department of Parks and Rec, and then by another public law transferred to the mayor of Tamuning. And then it was when the law said that every land that is not specifically named will be automatically transferred to the land trust. That's how this land got transferred to the land trust. It was not specifically named by any entity. No one was kind of looking out for it at that time. So for the benefit of the mayor, yeah, I acknowledge that the mayor did receive exclusive transfer of this land back in like Public Law 18-something, so back then. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. On the main motion, would any other member wish to be heard? On the main motion. Senator Nelson, did you have an amendment? On the main motion? If not, I'd invite the author of the bill to close.
Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleagues on behalf of the Tamuning Mayor and the Tamuning residents for their support. And I understand my colleagues, how they're very concerned about Chamorro Land Trust property, how it's being moved around. But like the previous speaker said, it started at Parks and Rec, went to Tamuning Mayor, then went to Chamorro Land Trust, now it's going back to Tamuning Mayor if it's passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the motion to send Bill number 161 down to the voting file. Any objection to sending Bill 161 down to the voting file? Hearing no objection, so ordered.
Senator Nelson, you're recognized on Bill 226.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just going to pass out these, the committee report and the bill. Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to place Bill 226-34 into the third reading file and to discuss the bill.
Is there any objection? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd also like to thank my colleagues for allowing me to add this into the session agenda. The committee report was just given to us last week, Friday. Mr. Speaker, Bill 226-34 is an act to amend subsection A15 of subsection 12802 of Article 8 of Chapter 12, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, to add a subsection 12802 Alpha 16 to Article 8 of Chapter 12, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, and to add a new Article 26 to Chapter 12 of Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, relative to establishing certification and licensure requirements for the massage therapy industry on Guam under the oversight of the Allied Health Board. Mr. Speaker, this bill really aims to do two specific things. The first one is to require massage certification for the masseuse for masseuse practicing on island, and two, to bring into the light a lot of the illicit practices done under the guise of massage therapy. And so I ask my colleagues for their support on this bill. This measure has been in past legislations. They've been trying to move this bill for the past 9 years, and so I believe that this is something that we need to address today to end human trafficking and modern slavery. And just a little bit of back history. Some of these testimonies given by licensed massage therapists, some of them say that without state licensing, our profession becomes more open to fake massage businesses in our neighborhoods. But requiring and enforcing licensing for massage therapy practices, we can drastically reduce the amount of fake massage parlors from even coming into existence. State licensing also helps massage therapists to eradicate the stigma associated with massage therapy. Many people do not realize that professional massage therapists have studied at a reputable school, have had our knowledge tested with a licensing exam, and are required to complete continuing education every year. And so this is a national-wide implementation. It has been, statistics have shown and data has shown that most of these women are imported, that are undocumented migrants from Asia, who are sometimes forcibly coerced either by fraud or blackmail into the massage trade. So essentially what they do is they are promised a job overseas in areas of America or other European countries, and then they are trafficked under the guise of massage therapy. And so I ask my colleagues for your support.
On the main motion, any senators wish to be heard? Senator Nicholas, after Senator Torres, after that, and then Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the intent of the author to create a more regulated environment for this industry. I think that it's necessary. I do have a couple items that I just wanted to seek clarity for. The first is regarding the grandfather of licensure on pages 6 through 7. It's basically a grandfather clause that opens up a window of 90 calendar days for any person, but subject to certain circumstances, to apply to the board to be grandfathered and allowed a license by the board. But it reads here, provided that the board shall by examination determine whether the applicant possesses the minimum skill and knowledge necessary to practice competently, which shall include but not limited to anatomy, kinesiology, physiology, pathology, principles of human behavior, massage theory and practice, hydrotherapy, hygiene, and first aid. And I'm curious as to the examination requirement. Is there a standardized examination that's been adopted for this purpose, or would the board need to develop this examination? I would like some clarity from the author, if she will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, we have been working with the Allied Health Board, and at this moment, they are in agreement that they would take on this task. And then as we move further down the line, we would like to see a separate massage licensing board come out of the Allied Health Board. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So my interpretation of that is that there is no examination that's been developed. And so what has me concerned is that the way this grandfather clause is written, I'll yield if I'm mistaken.
That's correct, Mr. Speaker. Right now, they do not have a selection criteria for this examination because this bill has not passed. And so once this bill is passed, they will work to do the examination criteria, which is why we gave a grandfather clause of 90 days to comply.
Thank you. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a problem. If there is no exam and we only have a 90-day window to be grandfathered, how do you get grandfathered within the 90 days if they don't develop the exam expeditiously? And if you only have 90 days, if they take 30 days to develop the exam, that means that everybody who wants to get grandfathered has to squeeze into the next 60 days the ability to be examined. I don't think there are examination protocols in place. And if the examination is crafted in a way where somebody who has 30 years of experience here in massage but just is not familiar with what's being examined or tested, then they may fail a test, they may fail the exam, not because they weren't professionals or they didn't know what they were doing, but because the way the exam was crafted was not in a manner that was consistent with something that they would be able to answer. Another challenge is language barriers and a lot of other areas. So I appreciate the grandfather clause. I think that that's kind of like a bridge to try and figure out how to move forward this added regulation, which is necessary. But I just don't feel like this grandfather clause is going to work the way it's drafted. And then it also has a lot of other components here that are just that leave a lot of questions open. And for example, I mean, does the Allied Health Board have the capacity to develop a proper grandfather examination based on all those items there? And thereafter, then you have like on page 7, line 7, an applicant for grandfathering must provide verification of employment in the practice of massage or massage therapy in Guam for no less than 5 consecutive years. I'm just curious as to like how that 5-year figure was determined. So, and then lastly on line 17, this grandfathering licensure shall expire within 1 year from issuance. After the expiration, the massage therapist must meet the qualifications under 122605 of this article. And that basically means that they must be board certified They must have received a passing grade on the Federation of State Massage Therapy Board's Massage and Bodywork Licensing Exam. They must have completed a minimum of 250 hours of supervised in-class initial massage or massage therapy training. I mean, I don't see how in 1 year somebody can continue to do their job as a massage therapist, availing of this grandfather clause, and then achieve all of these licensure and certification requirements at the same time. I mean, it just doesn't seem practical. Must include the study of anatomy. Yeah, it's 250 hours. And then they must have completed at least 30 hours of continuing education, and that's the whole section. This whole section applies. Relative to massage and massage therapy. Don't get me wrong, Mr. Speaker, I'm totally against human trafficking. I don't want that to be misinterpreted. I think that the industry does need to be better regulated. But I also know, and many of us in this community know, that we have establishments here on this island that are legitimate, hardworking people. They put their kids through private school, or they put their, they pay for their kids' college, providing this service. And I would proffer that perhaps the dangers are in the lack of, there's just a lack of policing, a lack of enforcement on some of the more sketchy operators. And it's bad apples spoiling the whole bunch, and no doubt. But I'm just concerned that we may be having very legitimate operators out there, very good people who are going to be, this is just not going to, they're not going to be able to continue operating and meet these requirements. We're going to be shutting down businesses if we pass this, whether they're legitimate or not. And I think that we perhaps need to put more time into developing the grandfather clause. I think that's something that needs to happen. So I just wanted to raise that. And then also there was another exemption here, another concern I had on page 11, starting on line 1. We do create an exemption for the indigenous practice of massage or massage therapy by a traditional Suruhana or Suruhanu who heals through massage and the use of traditional remedies that include the use of roots, leaves, bark, plants, and grass, and incorporates the cultural healing process. Of course, we would want to allow for our indigenous to continue the traditional practice, but when we make it a legal exemption, how do we define it? How are we going to define who is a legitimate Suruhana or Suruhanu that can avail of this exemption? Or can somebody just say that that's what they are because we're not specifically defining it in the statute? And if they just claim that that's what they are and the statute doesn't specifically define it, then there's no way that you can enforce the statute on that individual. So in light of these concerns, Mr. Speaker, I like to make the recommendation that we perhaps revert the bill back to committee for additional consideration, and I'd like to make that motion at this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There's been a motion to send the bill back to committee.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'd have to object to that motion. I think that if the mover is so willing, perhaps we can address some of the timelines that we can change here and make some of the amendments to the bill. Every moment that we wait, Mr. Speaker, a person is trafficked, a young girl is put in a position where she has to provide services for illicit purposes to meet, I don't want to be so harsh as to say it, but really what is going on in our island is essentially rape. You go down to Tumon, you go down to Harmon, you go anywhere, you can literally count the illicit massage businesses that are in place. And perhaps I'm speaking out of line, but we've had public hearings with DRT, and I asked them, how often do you go and check these massage businesses? Do you go annually? They don't even go annually, Mr. Speaker. And so I think that we need to address this bill now, and if my colleague is so willing, we can address the timeline piece and make the amendments. But
The motion really is not debatable. There's a motion to send the bill back to committee. There's been an objection. All those in favor of referring the bill back to committee, please indicate by raising your hand. Motion fails. Senator Adda.
I share some of the concerns that an earlier speaker had mentioned about we've got some folks that are out there who work at some of the spas who maybe I may be wrong, but may have some difficulty passing this examination, but they do know how to manipulate, and provide a massage. And I'm just afraid that with something like this, we'll basically shut down that spas because they'll have nobody, or at least the number of people that are certified and all that won't be available. Maybe based on the concerns that have been raised, maybe what we should be looking at is, when we question about, well, what is really going on behind those closed doors of a, quote, massage therapy place that's open at 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe there may be some reason to really question, what is going on behind there. And so maybe what we should be doing is to shut down that, massage therapy, whatever you want to call it, shut it down by 9, 10 o'clock at night, if that's what we're really concerned about. But to put in regulations that makes it difficult for these people who otherwise have a natural ability to massage, may basically just, shutting down that employment opportunity for them. And so I really would have, I do have objections. I do have reservations about putting in something like this, because then it just gets that much harder to be able to find a good spa to be able to get your massage. Thank you.
On the main motion. Senator Munoz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my discussion with the author of the bill earlier, I did agree to support it, and of course, because of the intention of reducing the amount of human trafficking on island. And what she did say, she said that they had a hard time going out and policing these. And maybe it's not so much the therapists that are legitimate, that actually they're the ones who's going to be suffering. I don't know if anybody else in this hall uses a massage therapist as much as I do, because I really do. And I started to think, oh dear, I hope my massage therapist is not affected by it. Or I hope my massage therapy the price of it doesn't go up. So I do have some concerns about the stringent requirements that may affect the legitimate parlors or massage therapists. And that's part of my concern, which is one of the reasons why I was thinking that maybe it might be a good idea to send it back to committee, just so that we can just kind of analyze a little bit of the dates there, just so that we can make it a little bit easier. But I just wanted to rise here and just voice some of my concerns about it, only because I'm definitely, I utilize massage therapy a lot because of what I do physically. So I hope it doesn't affect them, and that's part of my concern. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. On the main motion? No, the motion on the main motion. The motion to send back to committee has failed. We're on the main motion of the bill. Senator Torres.
Mr. Speaker, I support this bill. And I think that this bill is timely, especially now. We've had a history on Guam where we've had many massage parlors. And then the industry decided to, the government decided to crack down on them and only license massage therapists. So everybody just very simply changed their name to massage therapists. But there was nothing to really ensure that the buying customer was getting what was on that sign that was hung above the establishment. I read the bill through, and there were some things that seemed a little stringent. But in all practicality, this is exactly what we want. We want legitimate practices on Guam. We want to know that people who are entrusted to manipulate our bodies and various soft tissues in our bodies know what they're doing, have been properly schooled and trained in the art of massage therapy. I understand the components of the grandfathering, but I also recognize that will require an examination to ensure that those who are practicing are in fact knowledgeable. It isn't too much to ask, Mr. Speaker, it isn't too much to ask, I believe, that we have such a bill that regulates massage therapy industry on Guam. I am sick and tired, and I'm disgusted by all these establishments out there that are nothing but prostitution rings, that lure people in under the guise of a massage therapy experience. We need to crack down on those. And short of raiding establishments on a regular basis, the only real way that you can legitimize massage therapy industry on Guam is by having this kind of regulation. Much the same way when we go to a gymnasium and we pay the fees and we hire a personal trainer. I'm not just going to hire some good-looking person that has a fit body and say, this person is, well, who wouldn't, but my point is that in and of itself doesn't qualify the person to be a trainer. And personal trainers also go through examination, and they have to have certain knowledge of many of the components that are similar to the massage therapy certification. But we really have to think about what is it going to take on this island to reel in the industry and to make it legitimate. What is it going to take? I believe it's going to take this. We need to start weeding ourselves from these illicit establishments. We can't just allow people to call themselves this type of a business, but to practice another way. And what I find most assuring about this is when you look at the definitions in this, the definition for a licensed massage practitioner applies only to an individual, which means that the owner of an establishment can't hold the license and just hire people at their discretion. In order to actually practice, you have to be a licensed practitioner. But I think we need to just take a hard look about where we're going on this island and what it is that we want Guam to be. You know, these businesses here, these illicit businesses need to go. And if this is one step towards ensuring that we have a way to weed them out, then this is the way that we need to go, I believe. I don't think it's too stringent. I think it can't be stringent enough. If you're going to pay the prices that they command, then it's only fair that they be properly trained and educated and licensed. It's only fair to the consumers. But more so, I would like to one day see Guam cleaned up. I would like to see Guam have these businesses that are true businesses, that are not prostitution rings. that are not areas of corruption for all kinds of illicit behavior to take place. So I support this bill. I think that we have to come on hard and strong. We have to be very decisive about what we're going to do, and we have to set the standard. And I think that once you do that, then you can begin to enforce down the road. But let's get our act together. Let's do this. Get these massage parlors properly trained and licensed. And I think that there are other. Many people have some concerns about whether people have a knack for it. I think that anybody who holds a license on Guam that requires public health clearance and certain certificates, we shouldn't shortchange that process. Much the same way we do any other service, whether it's cosmetology or food service or anything that you think that anybody can logically do, reasonably do, but when it involves public health and safety and your direct hand on another person, you can't be too strict. And so I want to commend the author for pushing this because it is bold, but I think we've seen enough, and we just need to come down hard at this point. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Lee, and after Senator Lee, any other senator wish to be heard? Senator San Augustine. All right.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also commend the author of this bill. I think I share many of the sentiments of the retiring speaker, and I feel like this is an issue that we need to address now. There are some concerns that I have with this bill, and I would like the opportunity to ask a few questions and then perhaps propose an amendment or two. On page 10 of the bill, lines 1 through 4, there is a section that talks about the violation, suspension, revocation, and other penalties. And one of the questions I had, if the author of the bill will yield, is the section reads, "It is unlawful for any person to engage or attempt to engage in the occupation of practice of massage or massage therapy for compensation without a current license or certification to practice massage or massage therapy issued pursuant to this act." So that creates an issue in my mind because each article under 10 GCA has different penalties that might apply to this. So my question to the author is, how would we determine what penalties would apply to somebody practicing massage therapy for compensation without a current license or certification?
Do you yield?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right now, we don't have a current figure for the fees or penalties on this because right now this is not a requirement to be certified masseuse or licensed masseuse. So I'm sure that we can, if the senator is open to making an amendment, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Also on page 6 of the bill, and this was something that had been brought up at the public hearing, and some local massage therapy and spa businesses had come out and said that they felt that the minimum of 250 hours for supervised in-class initial massage therapy training would be too much. And in addition, the 30 hours of continuing education relative to massage therapy was also a little bit of a burden. They wouldn't be able to have the amount of time for their massage therapists once they become licensed to take that 30 hours of continuing education. So I guess my two additional questions would be, for the 30 hours of continuing education, is that 30 hours a year?
Yes, that is every time they need to renew their certification or their licensing. But just to point out that we drastically decreased the amount of hours that were required. In previous bills, they required 500 hours. Specifically for Bill 351-31, it was 250 hours. So we tried to find a middle ground and a more achievable number, and so we went with the certifying education units for 30 hours.
Thank you. That's very helpful for just knowing that it went from 500 to 250. So online, and I just also want to note as a point of information, I was doing some research as well, and the American Massage Therapy Association requires 48 hours of continuing education, I believe, over the course of 4 years. And so this is asking for 30 hours of continuing education annually, if I'm not mistaken. So perhaps we might be able to take that 30 hours of continuing education and increase it maybe over the course of 2 years or 3 years. And I'm not sure if the mover of or the author of the bill would be open to adding additional language on page 6 in section or subsection D that would, I guess, give these businesses a little bit more flexibility for the 30 hours. So we still want to make sure that they're doing their continuing education. I think that's a critical piece of this, but maybe just give them a little bit more flexibility on how to do that. And if my colleagues are open, then I can propose an amendment to that effect. Thank you.
Senator Snogestein.
Thank you, thank you, Speaker. You know, I rise in support of the bill, but exactly the previous speaker mentioned the requirements here. It's annual. I know I was just trying to find that, but I didn't find it. But it was great that she made that clear. But I do agree that the 30 hours of continuing education should be a longer period. And then maybe their certificate to practice. And the reason why I rise in reference to that is because Revenue and Tax issues a business license. Public Health issue a certificate to practice to perform. And when it was mentioned that Revenue and Tax didn't do an inspection, when I was there, we did inspections at massage parlors. And all we look for is, do you have a license to do business? We don't look at the public health license. We don't look at the fire department permits and all that stuff. But I honestly believe that the number of hours here, and it was brought up at the hearing, it may be too much, may take a while, but maybe on page 6, I would actually ask that on line 6, after the word supervise, instead of comma, maybe or. And one thing I do worry about is on supervise, you may have some folks that would have to be supervised. I worry that they may get charged by their supervisor that I won't employ you at this rate until you complete your 250 hours, and then they don't get signed. There's a bunch of issues that may come up. I've heard this from many of them, and then like I go back to the continuing education, it should be for a period, or maybe 3 or 4 or even 5 years. Every 5 years you must go through continuing education on the areas of massage therapy as approved or deemed equivalent to the standards of the associations that are involved.
Do you wish to address that? Senator, on the main motion, let's just take a short recess. Legal needs to consult. Legislature's back in order. Can I have order in the House, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is brought up to me that in page 10, line 5, it specifically states a violation of 10 GCA Chapter 12, but we wanted to include subsection 12230. 12230 alpha, which reads, any person who shall practice a healing art in any of its branches or shall treat human ailments by any system whatsoever without a valid existing license or exception from licensure under the provisions of this chapter shall be guilty of a misdemeanor upon conviction for the first offense and a felony for the second and subsequent offenses. So because of this, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to move this bill back into committee so that we focus more on the establishment that are forcing these women or men or children into this kind of illicit practice, and work on this bill to ensure that it does not prosecute those that are being victimized by the system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator. The motion to send back to committee. Senator Ada, you had a couple of things that we were awaiting Senator Espaldon on. Have you spoken to him about?
So can we proceed with Bill 222-34, which is the bill to authorize the sale of a 394 square meter irregular remnant portion of the old PD Agana Road fronting lot 85-2-R1 municipality of Dedito. That the area is the MDA building right there across from the Fisheye Park.
I believe when we were discussing the bill the other day, there was an amendment that had been proffered by the Vice Speaker, and Senator Espaldon at that time wanted to address the last two lines of the amendment. It was deleted. The clerk doesn't show it as having been deleted yet. So if it was deleted, can I just have a motion so that the clerk will show it appropriately? Senator Espaldon, I believe you had the floor when we...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry for my delay in coming to session. I had a personal issue I needed to take care of. That being said, on this particular bill, let me just reorient myself. According to the clerk, on this amendment to add a new section to the bill, bottom line, I guess the motion was to strike the last sentence. The owners of lot numbers 85-2R1 and lot 85-2-1 should be authorized. Then be authorized to purchase those portions immediately adjacent to the respective lots. Okay, actually, I think at that time I was concerned about right now and if my recollection is correct, that this is the small strip of property that's government property right in front of MDA down in Assen, around there. The amendment by our colleague, the good Vice Speaker, I believe, was putting all these requirements of what needed to transpire to, and wanted to put it into the bill about the purchaser should be required to produce a land registration map, a registration survey map, etc. And at the very end of the amendment was the owners of lot 85-2 shall be authorized to purchase those portions immediately adjacent to their respective lots. I believe that my concern at the time was that we didn't know who the owners were of those two lots, and I'm not really sure that was exactly what the bill called for. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sorry? You struck it out? Oh. Then I was just informed by the move of the amendment that she took out that last line that I had a concern on.
Oh, I have no objection, and if I'm allowed to just withdraw that sentence from the amendment, I'd be happy to, or I have no objection to your amendment, just to save time. Thank you.
Then I have nothing else to say then, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
All right, so is there any if there's no objection, we'll Senator Ada.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday when the amendment was proffered, I objected and I asked that we set aside the bill so that at least I could get a better understanding of the implications of putting, going through the, quote, land registration process. And I believe that what prompted the amendment was because of the statement made by the Director of the Department of Land Management during the public hearing that the easement in question is a substandard unregistered underline boldface. That's a significant statement. To say that means that we really don't know who owns that remnant of property that the MDA owner is wanting to buy. We don't know the metes and bounds, and we don't know. All we know is that it's there, but we don't have any details. And so, generally, I think the information the Department of Land Management sends down is very accurate, but I think we should live by the rule, trust but verify. And so the committee did that. And so, first of all, there was the question of, is that sliver of land in fact registered? And the answer to that is yes. So what has happened is that, and the committee asserts that what has happened that led to the statement that this sliver of land that we want to buy is unregistered is because in order to really get to the answer, you have to go to Pre-Organic Act documentations, which is not normally available at Department of Land Management, and it's not normally reviewed by land management researchers. If there's any doubt in anybody's mind, you have to go down to the district court, and down in the basement of the district court are kept documents of the land takings during the naval government days. And so some of the information that has been found is, first of all, this Lot 85. This Lot 85, the lot where MDA sits on, and part of it that was taken by the naval government. We have found records from pre-World War II Guam and dug up the June 1941 tax roll. And in that document, it shows that the heirs of Andres Anderson Roberto were assessed real property taxes for the property known as Lot 85. And in that document, it shows the size of the property, that it was an 80,000 square meter piece of property. And then after World War II, beginning in 1947, the Navy started condemning property from Naval Station all the way to the intersection of right in front of Adelup. That was the beginnings of Marine Drive, Route 1. And they started condemning land to acquire easements in perpetuity in order to put in that road. And so we also then found documents so we found documents that the Navy took 5,300 square meters portion of Lot 85, the one that belonged to Mr. Roberto. So the federal government took it. That's their land. Then we were able to find documents of the, I guess they call it the lis pendens, under Civil Case 31-50, and that was the judicial action that condemns the strip of land of varying width from the boundary of Apple Harbor Reservation Naval Station to the intersection of Route 1 and Route 6. That's the Adelup intersection. And so these were documents that were found over at the district court. Now, what further happened is that we were able to find documents. The court judgment filed on September 19, 1952 as part of this land condemnation, which recognizes the owner of the lot, and a document dated 1952 which shows the satisfaction of judgment that the federal government paid for the condemnation of that property for the amount of $2,700 for this 5,300 square meters. Now, what happened is, so then the federal government condemned a lot of these properties along where Route 1 sits now. And then later, many of these highways, streets, and infrastructure created by the federal government through the federal land takings were then transferred to the government of Guam. And so the so there's a so there's documentation whereby the government of Guam now has an interest in that narrow sliver of remnant portion of Basic Lot 85. So there's a trail of documentation that shows that it first belonged to the Robertos. The federal government came in. They condemned a part of it, ultimately taking 5,300 square meters. And then later, the federal government turned over a lot of this infrastructure, streets and roads, to the government of Guam. It now belongs to the government of Guam. And then what happened is, so in planning out for this road, you know, it was basically a tabletop survey, and as they went along, the as-built, they actually had to do some realignments and whatnot. So this wide stretch of road that was condemned, they actually didn't need the entire part of it. And so they realigned the road, and what was left was this sliver of property, the remnant that sits in front of the MDA. And so that then becomes what we call the remnants and slivers of land, all right? Now, what the bill intends to do is to sell government of Guam land, and it will basically result in two things. One, it would make the MDA lot the size that it needs, and it would bring this land into now this sliver of land, which is just sitting there, will now be brought into the real property tax system. So first we sell the land, get some income from that, and then from that sale we assess real property taxes. So basically, going through all that, one can reasonably conclude that there's really no reason to put the purchaser through the maze of the Land Title Registration Act. And the property is already titled. Now, the Director of Land Management said that the purchaser should be required to produce a land registration map and register the entire remnant of the old Pediagania Road. And why have him go through all that? We know it belongs to the government of Guam. We know where the meets and bounds are. And so, you know, we have a 1950 map here that, again, was obtained from the bowels of the district court. showing the points of the meets and bounds of these properties. So it's already there. So my whole point is that, you know, for land management to come down here and emphasize that that sliver of land is unregistered was only partially correct. Well, actually, it was incorrect. It is registered. There is a land title. We know who owns it. It belongs to the government of Guam. So why do we need to put the landowner, the private landowner who wants to buy it, through all these hoops? So that's the basis for my objection to this amendment, to require the landowner to have to go through that exercise. Thank you.
Madam Vice Speaker, it was your amendment. Do you wish to address that?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the previous speaker for the history of this property. I think it's important to know that this property was previously owned by, you know, one of us, and that it was condemned by the United States government and eventually transferred to the government of Guam. And now the government of Guam is deciding to allow a different owner to buy this as he calls it, the sliver of and remnants of property of the bull cart trail. It's an old bull cart trail, which we all know, you know, are owned by the government of Guam. And I have never said that we do not know the owner of this property. I said we need to register the property. I agree with the director of the Department of Land Management that ownership of the property, I mean, it's very, I also want to share a story. I want to share a story about land scam, the big, huge scandals of land that we had in the 1990s where government of Guam land was stolen by people because the government of Guam did not have the ability to register all its property. So those who were, they were buying and selling without very accurate, you know, or without registrations and without the, you know, approved land maps, survey, you know, precise survey land maps. So when this property is going to, anyway, so right now it is a duty, and you can look this up in the code, of the Attorney General in Guam to register with the cooperation of the Department of Land Management, and I've been checking on this, and they've been working very hard to register government of Guam properties. That, if they could do them all in one day, they should, because that is the only way to protect government of Guam land, what is the boundaries. So it's not because we don't know who owns the land. It's very clear who owns the land. In fact, there's even a separate law that says all bull cart trails are owned by the government of Guam, regardless of anything else. But, and it's not because, you know, we don't have an idea of how large this piece of property is, because there have been, as he described, table surveys done. But in order for MDA, in order for any of us to take a property and mortgage it, you're going to have that property registered. It's going to have title, and the registry is simply, we don't put it in our registry. It is definitely searchable. You can find, you know, transfers of land, all the records, but it's not going to be registered property unless you take it to court and you ask them to approve this map. You approve the owner, and that takes away the ability of anyone else to claim ownership of that property. And this is actually, the owner is going to be required to survey this property anyways. In order to get it transferred, they're going to have to survey it. They're going to have to do a map that shows, you know, it as another lot, or I don't know if they're going to be able to combine it with their existing lot. Perhaps not. They're going to call it another lot number. They're going to transfer that over. But this has to be done, and the Department of Land Management has made it very clear. And even if you look on the maps, there's not a lot number. It's called the Ode PD Aganya Road. I just want to, when the property, the warranty deed which conveyed the lot that MDA stands on to MDA clearly states, quote, encroachment of the concrete building on the premises in question onto a portion of the PD Aganya Road, as shown on the survey map. And this language that they're using, a portion of the PD Aganya Road, it's not a lot number that they recognize. It's not a registered property. And so in order to get exactly what they want, they're going to have to survey this property. Anyways, it's just a matter then of going to court, notifying the adjacent landowners so that anyone else who disputes that this might be their property and not the government of Guam's has that opportunity to do that. That's just exactly how it's done. It should not be avoided. And because it has to be done, all I'm trying to say is who's going to pay for that? Because it's either we ask that the person who's going to purchase this property pay for it, or the government of Guam is going to pay for that registration, or this transfer is not going to happen. I mean, it's just not physically, they're not going to get the title that they want, that we're trying to give them in this bill. And so that's all. I'm just trying to make this as clean as possible and as clear as possible, and I think the government of Guam is doing a huge service to this person by allowing them to buy. This is property along Marine Drive. And the government is not asking for anything in return for the past encroachments. And this is, I think, a very small thing to ask, that they incur the cost of the land registration, which somebody's going to have to incur that cost. And so I'm asking my colleagues to please support this. Thank you.
Thank you. It was her motion she just closed. Did you wish to speak on it again?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, because what the previous speaker has mentioned, it's really it's not clear what we're really wanting, because first we started off with that he's got to...
okay. I hate to do this, but we have a commitment to the law fair this afternoon, and they need to move the desk back and clear this room. The clerks will, the staff will help make sure that there are no personal stuff on the desk, because people will be walking through the building for on tours. So it starts at 5:30, and the staff needs to move this back. We'll resume session at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. All right, well, we'll recess at this time. Use this time, please, to discuss the issue with the Vice Speaker. And there's another bill that you have that we should try to clarify, whatever it is. We'll take your bill up on Monday, Senator Espaldon. All right, so we have one bill left on the agenda that is to be discussed, is Senator Espaldon's 243. I'm sorry, we also have 245 by Senator Nelson. So 9 o'clock Monday morning, please. And if we can work out the problems with the two bills that have been set aside so they can go down without hitch, and the clerks will be instructed at this point to please engross all the other bills that are ready, so that the three bills that we discuss on Monday can be quickly engrossed and we can vote Monday afternoon. All right? That's the schedule for Monday. Thank you. We stand adjourned recessed until 9 o'clock on Monday morning.